Welcome back, everyone. We're ready to come back into session here on agenda item H4. Before we do that, I just want to remind everyone, Keely Kent is in the NIMS chair. She will be with us here when we wrap this agenda item up. I'll turn to Executive Director Burton, see if we have any news on the salmon front. And so with that, I will turn it over to Marlene Bellman to orient us to this agenda session. Marlene.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hessemer. Good afternoon, members of the Council. This is agenda item H4, Final Assessment Methodologies. This agenda item provides a briefing to the Council on the Scientific and Statistical Committee's Accepted Practices Guidelines for Groundfish Stock Assessments document. The SSE Groundfish Subcommittee produced a draft of this document, as well as a summary report from their December 2024 meeting. This document is intended to supplement the Council's terms of reference for the Groundfish Stock Assessment review process and provide Groundfish Stock Assessment teams with default approaches to consider when dealing with certain stock assessment data and modeling issues. The stock assessment teams may diverge from the guidelines and should provide justification for doing so prior to stock assessment review panel meetings or other advisory body meetings. These guidelines are not intended to provide a comprehensive list of all issues, but rather they focus on a number of issues that the SSE has so far considered and reviewed. Materials for this agenda item, you have reference materials, the Accepted Practices Guidelines document, as well as the Groundfish Subcommittee report. In addition, there was a supplemental report from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the bulk of which that report included technical material to address the Groundfish Subcommittee. In addition, you have an advisory body report from the full SSC. With that, I'll take any questions.
All right, before we begin, any questions on the overview? And I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll turn to California Department of Fish and Wildlife for their report. Caroline McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. At the discretion of the Mr. Vice Chair, I don't think you want me to read 74 pages of technical material that the SSC was going to review, but I will just hit a couple of high notes if that's okay. Just want to hit the high points that we have submitted the 75 pages of content coming back from the December workshop that was held, where the continued and progressive work of relative and absolute indices of estimates of abundance are being worked on progressively. So I just want to thank the Council for allowing those workshops to take place. And we do look forward to hearing from the SSC this afternoon and also continued collaboration with our stat teams. Really the goal here for us was to continue working towards integrating these ROV indices, not just for our full benchmark for quillback rockfish, but the application of these methods into future assessments. Thank you. Take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. McKnight on the California Department of Fish and Wildlife report? Not seeing any questions. We'll move on to the Scientific and Statistical Committee report. Dr. John Field, are you online? Can you hear us?
Thank you. Yes, I'm online. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'll be reading from Supplemental SSC Report 1. The SSC discussed the accepted practices guidelines for the groundfish stock assessments in 2025-2026 that were developed by the Groundfish Subcommittee during a meeting on December 2nd and 3rd, 2024. The Groundfish Subcommittee considered 3 topics in that meeting. 1, current approaches used to address spatial closures and stock assessment. 2, methodologies and resulting estimates of abundance from the ROV survey conducted along the California coast. And 3, other needed revisions to the accepted practices guideline. John Field, that's me, provided a summary of the Groundfish Subcommittee report, and John Budrick of CDF&W provided an update of the revisions to the ROV survey methodologies. The Groundfish Subcommittee revisions to the accepted practices guidelines for 25-26 included the addition of text on risk table guidance, the citation of the review on addressing spatial closures and stock assessments, and other minor changes. No explicit guidance on the use of ROV abundance indices was added, given that this is still in the early stages of development and has not yet been widely applied and reviewed in the assessment process. The SSC does not suggest substantive changes to the version of the accepted practices guidelines in a briefing book, although a few very minor edits will be made. The SSC endorses the accepted practices guidelines for groundfish stock assessments in 25 and 26, including the minor revisions. The SSC appreciates CDF&W's work on the ROV survey and endorses its potential use in stock assessments, although decisions over use will need to be made on a species-by-species basis and are ultimately up to the stock assessment team. The ROV survey could be used to produce estimates of the number or biomass of animals in the survey area, absolute abundance, or of trends in abundance, e.g. relative abundance. However, providing estimates of the absolute abundance is more challenging analytically. They would be also expected to be subject to additional uncertainties compared to relative indices of abundance and would require further development and review before their use in an assessment. The SSC requested additional revisions be made to the ROV survey methodologies. In addition, the SSC highlights that any estimates or indices must be provided by the STAR panel to March 31st data deadline to be considered in the California quillback rockfish assessment. That concludes our statement. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Field on the SSC report? And there are no hands here, so thanks again, Dr. Field. Okay, that completes all of the reports. We have some public comment signed up. Pause momentarily while that comes up on the screen before us. We have 3 sign-ups in this order: Jerry Nozick, Chris Howard, and Steve Huber. We will start with Jerry Nozick. Can you hear us, Jerry?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm Jerry's son, Giuseppe. I'm speaking on behalf of him because he went out fishing. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, just go ahead.
My name is Jerry Nozick, and I am a trawl fisherman in Monterey, California. The current reduction in the quota for petrale for this year raises a big question in my mind about the methodology of the stock assessment evaluation process on our coast. In my view, as a fisherman that fishes along the coast for petrale sole, the population that we currently have is massive and is of the greatest abundance that I have witnessed in the past 25 years. Catches are predominantly very large and mature females, and the population covers even non-traditional fishing grounds. If there is supposed to be a sampling done for the catches on our docks to assure accurate models of the population, from my experience, sampling on my catches have hardly ever been done in the past 4 years for petrale sole. I don't know about other ports, but I'm one of the very few trawlers still active on our part of the coast. Nobody has been fishing below Big Sur for the past decade. So how can the models be accurate and reliable, and how are we supposed to trust the stock assessment process when at the peak of the population we are being told that there is low recruitment within the stock? How will the stock assessment look when the stocks eventually plunge, which will inevitably happen as it is part of the natural cycle? At this time, we should be increasing the quota rather than decreasing it. After this reduction of the quota, I'm seriously worried that most of the fleet will run out of fish on their accounts by the summer. And if that happens, it will have a catastrophic impact on our communities, markets, and fishery. Only a small portion of the active fleet is currently fishing, yet a quarter of the quota has already been harvested. It is not because we are looking for the petrale sole. On the contrary, we are actually starting to try to avoid them, and yet the catches are massive. I'm looking for the council and administration of the fishery to call for an independent review of the petrale sole stock assessment, and possibly an overview of the entire stock assessment process. Each fishery management plan has to fulfill all of the goals for sustainable fisheries, which also includes guaranteed access of the fishing communities to its resource. If the stock assessment process hinders the access of our communities to these stocks and eliminates portions of our industry, then the management process has failed its purpose and needs to be corrected. We depend on only a few species to keep our fishery active. Due to many different reasons, we have lost most of the markets for majority of the fish that are being managed on our coast. Species like Dover sole, English sole, Rex sole, and even medium-sized petrale sole are almost impossible to sell to processors. The petrale sole is a crown staple of our fishery, of our coast, and one of the pillars on which our fishery still exists. If we have a major disruption, which these cuts may cause, it may lead to a complete collapse in large portions in our communities that are still trying to survive under your management. It'll be your failure if this happens. Please take this matter seriously, because it doesn't get any more serious in our life as fishermen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I realize you were reading that for Jerry. Could I get your name? I missed it.
Giuseppe?
Okay. I'm going to see if anybody has any questions on the report, but I understand you may not be able to answer them. But let me look around the table. Rebecca Lent?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the comment regarding markets. Can you tell me why, from what you've heard, why you're unable to sell some of these fish, which are frankly really good quality fish? Is it imports, the competition? What's going on as far as you know? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not really too familiar with all of it. I don't know if I'll be able to answer any of the questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, though, for taking the time to read that in for Jerry.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, we have Chris Howard. Chris, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. It's been about 18 months, I believe, since our movement on the Quillback, and I'm here on behalf of Del Norte County, California, District 3 Supervisor. And our community still has a great deal of concern as it relates to the species and the closure of our waters from 20 fathoms to 50 fathoms. It's been a substantial impact, obviously, to a small community like ours that relies on the economy, especially of our rockfish species that seem to be, as we have now seen through our charter boat captains bringing National Marine Fisheries Service personnel and also California Department of Fish and Wildlife Service personnel out to these waters. And yet, after 18 months, we still do not have a solution to get us to where we need to be. And it's from an elected person standpoint who has constituents, has a promise to make our economy sustainable. This is not acceptable. Guys, I feel like we're in a big circle right now, and I've heard the terms uncertainty today. I've lack of direction, and there's chaos going on at the federal level. I was in DC for 7 days. I just got home Friday. I raced up here to be with you. I'm here with you today because that uncertainty on the federal side means a lack of dollars that are going to go into making sure you have the data to plug into these models to make this thing work and get my waters open. Yet I have zero faith at this point in time that that's going to happen, not only at a state level, but also at a federal level. So where does that leave us? That leaves us continued operation of our charter boat captains saying, it's prevalent, it's out there, we're catching them, everybody's seen it, yet it can't feed into any model to produce the basis of the science that allows this fishery to be open. So that's the circle I'm talking about. And I really need this body to find some way to allow the data that's being collected by our charter boat captains, whatever that might look like, to be placed into these models. Because without it, I think we're going to have 10 years of closures in our waters from 20 to 50 fathoms that shouldn't be closed, just shouldn't be closed, because we know we have a robust population of quillback rockfish right off our coast that we just can't access the rest of the critters around them. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time than that. You've heard me for the last 2 years preaching on this particular subject matter, but please find a way to get that data that our charter boat captains and others collect into the model so we can get these waters open again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Howard? Mark Gorelnik.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hassemer. I just want to thank you for coming and providing your testimony. I know you speak for a lot of folks, and I do think that there is concern on the council around the table here about the lack of opportunity, but we have certain constraints we have to run through in order to make changes.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that acknowledgement.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Thank you, Chris. And next we have Steve Huber. Good afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Council. I'm Steve Huber. I won one of the six packs out of Crescent City. So just some praise in the beginning. The implement of descending devices is positively showing effect for mortality on our fish. So in that case too, we need to adjust the mortality to which the quillback doesn't have mortality. It's the hardiest between them and the coppers are the two hardiest fish in our system. ROV is going to be great for us when we can get it up into our area to where we need the stuff done. People don't realize that we don't have fishing after 50 fathoms. We don't. So we're really restricted between that 50 to 0. Anything over 50, we don't have any rock structure. And that makes a big difference. A lot of the boats that are coming out of the other ports down below, they want to go 50 fathoms because they have the ability to fish those areas. We don't. We're separate than everybody else. We are really restricted to under 50 fathoms, and that's a big thing for us. I think the ground fishing cooperation data that we did this year for out of Crescent City and all along the coastline has put out a lot of data into our system, except one fish, that quillback. So there has to be a way to add data for the quillback. And I know that the state takes them if somebody brings them in separately and they ask to relinquish it, it's processed. But where's all the data for that? Is it sitting in RecFin separately? Is it sitting in another file? You can go on to RecFin and you can see the quillbacks that are caught out of our area. Our mortality, we were down below 0.9% this year as the studies ran. So the MPAs, that's a whole nother story. I talked to CCFRP after their funding meeting last week. They have funding now to do these things, but we have to be on the board with it. There has not been an MPA study at Reading Rock, Wilson, or Seal in 11 years. So if you're telling me the quillback live between the Farallones and the border, and we're only getting half the data because they ran 10 trips out to the Farallones and 0 trips up to us, how can you create a model that shows true data of what we have? So we're very limited surf counters on the docks this year. It was average of one person. So we got a one person maybe 3 days a week. And if we're using that data to drive the quillbacks and what our people are catching, because we're strictly we have a few charter boats captains out of there and a lot of wreck fishing. And they're catching the quillbacks. But if there's nobody there to take the data and see what other stuff comes in, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And now it's not that difficult to have those counters there 4 days a week, but we got to hire the people. They don't want to work. So we're really in a catch-22 on how to get that data into our system. This year, we're going to see more people fishing in Crescent City than ever before. Our rockfish limit is 10 and 2 lingcod. We're going to see people that are salmon fish is going to be 0. They're making their way down the coastline. They're heading to Crescent City, they're heading to Brookings, and they're heading to the Rogue because they have opportunities to catch salmon. So we need more enforcement in there on those docks to bring those people up to speed. You put a game warden on those docks, things clean up very quickly because the word gets out. But if you get people that don't know what they're doing, the last day of the season, I had a boat come in from out of the area. They got a quillback, that female that's pregnant, and flayed out a yellow eye. No clue. Our group has put up posters on each one of the dock spaces that show the quillback, the yellow eye, release the coppers because you're limited to 1, and be very careful with the canaries. And that was put up by our groups, HASA and Crescent City Fishing Group. So education is the key to this thing. We're seeing the education go to work, but it's the driving factor is done by the community. It's not done by any of the staffs here. So I just hope that we can get stuff on the books. We can start tagging some of these quill back because CCFRP has the ability to tag and get them up in our area. And I propose that they bring a person up to come tag on my boat. When I have 5 people in the boat, I can put one of them people on my boat to help come tag and get some more data on that quillbacks so that it's just not paper data. It's real data. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Huber on his testimony? Rebecca Lent.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Huber, for coming to testify. And really want to express my appreciation as I've met in California and up the coast, more and more recreational participants. I've noticed how much they participate in data collection and tagging and taking people on board, and that really makes a difference. And I think it's important that the scientists do their best to incorporate those data where possible to supplement the information that we have. And it comes at an expense to the recreational participants at a time when you probably don't feel you're getting the payback. So thank you so much for keeping the faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Steve. That completes our public comment. Takes us to council discussion and action here, and that is to review and approve the SSC recommendations on the accepted practices and guidelines. So I will look for anybody to initiate discussion on this topic. Chair Caroline McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. A couple things. I think I'm going to have a few comments relative to ROV again, but I do have one process question if I can maybe call on council staff. Is the accepted practices guideline only come about from subcommittee review and suggestions, or can it also be amended at STAR panels?
Through the Vice Chair, thank you for the question, Councilmember McKnight. The accepted practices guidelines is taken up secondarily after the terms of reference, and they are recommendations initially through the Groundfish subcommittee to the full SSC, and they are issues that have been raised and resolved and have gone through STAR panel review. So that's sort of the process of how an issue gets resolved, raised, reviewed to the Groundfish subcommittee, and those recommendations are made to this document and to the full SSC.
Caroline?
Thank you. That answered my question. Other comments? Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Mattis.
Thank you, Vice Chair. It's my understanding we didn't need a motion for this one, so I don't think any of us have prepared one. But just looking at the SSC Groundfish Subcommittee report, it outlines a lot of issues to be looking at as they move forward with the STAR panels. I know the Groundfish Subcommittee spent a lot of time on this, and then the full SSC did review it, and I believe I just heard that they agreed with they agreed with the best practices, and they don't have any suggested substantive changes to the guidelines. With our Groundfish Subcommittee of the SSC and then the full SSC reviewing it, I think we're in a pretty good place. On the overall best practices, I think there's some continued dialogue about maybe ROV that we're going to have over the next few minutes. I don't know if that's the kind of guidance we're looking for or if it needs to be something more formal than that.
Caroline McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Ms. Mattis, for teeing me up a little bit better there. Yeah, there isn't an action item here per se. It's just some discussion. As I mentioned under the CDF&W report, we are appreciative of the continued conversation that's going on and the progressive work to integrate ROV indices into stock assessments. My question prior specifically about accepted practices and STAR review is that we have submitted or there has been exploration of ROV indices now in copper rockfish and presumably upcoming in quillback. So I'm just making sure and being clear that we're not missing opportunities to incorporate this into documents such as accepted practices or TORs at the right time as appropriate. And in combination with what we're hearing is maybe some uncertainty about the future of STAR panels and stock assessment work, where we should be looking to make sure we're not missing opportunities. So beyond that, I again appreciate all the work done by the subcommittee and SSC to work with CDF&W on advancing this work. And I'm very pleased to see that there is an endorsement for their general use at the discretion of stat teams. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion here, and my notes here say there is no motion needed. It's just approve, consider and approve the report and the SSC's recommendations here. I'm seeing maybe a couple of hands, but Lynn Mattis, you're most, I saw your hand go up.
Thank you, Vice Chair. While what's in this document doesn't specifically address some of the things that the two gentlemen from Del Norte County were addressing, I think some of that work is going to continue on behind the scenes as we look into how to incorporate more of the CCFRP data, some of the citizen science data, incorporating new methodologies like the ROV data. I know that work continues. Our research folks, our stock assessors, many of us around this table are always trying to find ways to make sure we get the best data we can to inform those assessments. So I just want to acknowledge what we heard from those two gentlemen from Del Norte County. It may not look like anything's happening right now with the language that's in this practices guideline, but there is work being done to incorporate, to learn how to incorporate that type of information in the future.
Thank you, Lynn. Corey Niles.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and yeah, appreciating the comments from CDFW, ODFW. I thought I heard Lynn earlier suggest we didn't need a motion, as you did, and was approving. I guess I would also approve, but going back to the end of the day yesterday, and Mr. Burden bringing up the need to start to think about things differently. I'm kind of thinking what would happen if I did have a concern with these guidelines right now. You know, I would be told there's nothing you can do about it because the discussion already happened. And I should say, really appreciate Dr. John Field being here today, and recognizing on a Saturday with all that's going on, and all the work that Marlene I know put into this and corralling the SSC, all the good thought, but just like, again, if we had a concern, I think they're there to answer our questions if we had them, but this isn't something where the process would allow for any kind of iteration or back and forth today. So just in the spirit of thinking about how we might do things differently, I think the staff cost and the personnel cost already was spent by the SSC and Marlene and others, but so sunk cost, I guess, but it's been a while. There's items like this where there's limited input for the council, and just thinking out loud here, not just brainstorming since we seem to have some time, but I don't want to make it sound like unappreciative of the work. And like Lynn makes a really good point that there are things happening everywhere that don't come out in our discussions because we're trying to get through the agenda here.
Thank you, Corey. Executive Director Burden.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And Mr. Niles, your comments, I guess, have me just reflecting on this document and how it came about and how it's used. And I think you raised some points. I think we should always be asking ourselves, what, if anything, can we be doing better? I have no doubt that, this document is a step in the direction of making things better. I mean, it's a compilation of issues and practices and science that when stock assessment authors look at this, that will help them be more efficient in putting together a stock assessment. But sometimes there are reasons to look at things like this and say, is this the best approach? And so I think as most of you know, we have been contemplating a project that would look at our stock assessment process. And that RFP, a draft of it, is in your briefing book under workload planning. And so you might think about that RFP and this document here as part of that process. And assuming we move forward with that project, we would be asking ourselves, is this document the best approach? Is our process the best approach? And so there will be a way to consider this and improvements on it. I would also maybe just characterize this this is my impression of how this is used. I would characterize it maybe in a different way than you did, Mr. Niles, where these are guidelines, and so if there's a stat team that's out there and they say, yeah, we review these guidelines, they look great, but our opinion is different about some parameter. These aren't binding. I think the SSC would expect some rationale about why they would deviate from the guidelines, but I don't view these as hamstringing any of the stat teams and doing something that's different. They're intended to be helpful, is the way that I interpret them.
Corey Niles.
Thanks for those thoughts, Medical. I guess, and yeah, my points don't always come out as intended, but I wasn't suggesting that they're not binding, but like, what is the council's rule? Like, I think the thing that caught my ear, and I'm not going to remember the words you actually used yesterday, but on the ecosystem, it might matter. You're like, can't the science centers just handle this themselves? So why cannot the stock assessors and the SSC handle this themselves? And the other point being, if any of us had a comment up today, I guess the only time to change it would be probably whenever we do this again, probably 2 years from now, because there's no iteration in this. I think Marlene, please tell me if I'm mistaken there, but this was came about through some winter meetings, and I do see the value of the scientists being transparent about what they plan on doing, and be there to answer questions. And we've seen that happen this past few years with our assessment process of new folks coming in and not understanding this kind. So there is a value to it, but just again, kind of thinking out loud, there is really no council input here, except for maybe some question and Q&A on better understanding why the guidelines they are as they are. But getting repetitive. But yeah, if we wanted to suggest changes, I just don't see there's opportunity today to do that.
Thank you, Corey. Other comments, discussion? Aside from the discussion I've heard some approval of the SSC report, accepting that. Is there any disapproval? Or is this council ready to accept that? Again, it's not a motion, but I want to make sure everybody is on board, agrees with what the SSC said. I'm seeing some head nods around the table. Rather than drag this out, Marlene, what do we need to do?
Thank you, Vice Chair Hassemer. Thank you for the thoughtful discussion and guidance to the SSC to move forward with their accepted practices guidelines for the coming stock assessment cycle.
All right, thank you. look around and see if there's any closing comments or discussion. Not seeing any. That completes this agenda item. And with that, I believe, well, depends where we're headed here.
Let's keep going through Groundfish. Go to H5.
All right, we are going to move on to H5. Needed to make sure we weren't going to Salmon, so on H5, I have to pass the gavel back to our chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hasmer. And with that, we'll get some seats being moved here a little bit. So we'll get started shortly. All right, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, council members. This is agenda item H5, the Cordell Bank Conservation Area revisions. I have a quick PowerPoint to orient y'all on the range of alternatives, but just flagging that there's no impact analysis to be described here because nothing's really changed since November. It's just all been incorporated. Any comments from November? So, sorry, still getting used to this new setup. Okay. So just to start out with, I wanted to do a quick reminder on the types of management areas because we have a lot of different, you're going to hear about a lot of them today, and there are a lot of acronyms with all different purposes. So a groundfish conservation area, or a GCA, the purpose of those areas is to limit impacts to groundfish. These can be gear specific or fishery specific, and some examples of these are the Cordell Bank GCA, which is the subject of our action today, the non-trawl rockfish conservation area, and the trawl RCA. We also have essential fish habitat conservation areas, or EFHCAs, and the purpose here is to limit impacts to essential fish habitat for groundfish. These can be gear specific, so they can be bottom trawl or bottom contact, and they can be applicable to all fisheries or just to select fisheries. And then finally, our newest tool is the Groundfish Exclusion Area, or a GEA, and the purpose of these is to limit impacts to sensitive habitats, but not EFH, from groundfish fishing. These can also be gear specific and fishery specific. So here's our action area, and we're looking here at the the Cordell Bank Groundfish Conservation Area, the GCA. And this yellow polygon you are seeing here on the map on your screen. So the GCA was implemented in the early 2000s for recreational and commercial fisheries to limit impacts to overfished rockfish. And these were primarily canary, widow, and yelloweye. It prohibits groundfish fishing with certain exceptions for flatfish. These are detailed in Table 1 of Attachment 1, and we're going to talk a little bit more on these exceptions on the next slide. Historically, this area overlapped with 4 other management areas, the trawl RCA, the non-trawl RCA, and 2 EFHCAs, but it now only overlaps with the EFHCAs and it borders the non-trawl RCA. The trawl RCA used to cover the bank but was removed during Amendment 28, and then the non-trawl RCA boundary is now 75 fathoms, which we did in Amendment 32, and that follows the border of the GCA now. So with all of these areas overlapping or bordering, you can see that the regulatory complexity in this area is incredibly high. So when you first start looking at this and understanding all the exceptions and the regulations, it's obviously a bit chaotic. And so just really quickly want to break it down here. And so this yellow area, again, is the GCA. It's close to groundfish fishing, but there are exceptions for non-trawl commercial take of other flatfish and recreational take of petrale, starry flounder, and the other flatfish complex. This pink polygon, and this is kind of shaded orange in parts of it where it overlaps with the GCA, is our bottom contact EFHCA. Here, no bottom contact gears are permitted. This dotted area underneath is our bottom trawl EFHCA. Here, no bottom trawl gear is permitted except for demersal seine. Note that this area was modified under Amendment 28 to actually expand the boundaries of this particular EFHCA. And then to the right of this more darker dashed line, that's the 75 seaward boundary of the non-trawl RCA. So now we allow non-bottom contact gears within this area, including in the little portion of that pink polygon, which is the bottom contact EFHCA. So all of this kind of chaos that I was describing became really apparent during the development of the 2023-2024 harvest specifications and Amendment 32. And so CDFW actually flagged this back in March 2023 and prioritized on the groundfish workload list and brought forward a proposal in September 2023 to implement this GEA. We took action in November 2024 to adopt the purpose and need range of alternatives and a preliminary preferred alternative, and we are here now to select a final preferred alternative. So your council tasks for today are to consider the NIMS report and recommendations and to adopt a final preferred alternative. In terms of materials, Attachment 1 was that draft analysis. You also have 4 supplemental advisory body reports, a NIMS report, and public comments. Really quickly, just wanted to highlight the purpose and need. This was adopted by the council in November 2024, which was a staff proposal with some modifications. Again, the big thing here is to provide fishing access to previously closed areas while protecting sensitive habitats, and it's needed to remove unnecessary regulations and to reduce regulatory complexity. So under no action, everything as I previously described would stay exactly the same. But under your preliminary preferred alternative, we would remove the GCA, which is outlined here in this kind of green, or it was that yellow polygon you saw before. We would implement a GEA that overlaps with the bottom contact EFHCA, so this pink polygon on your screen. And here we would prohibit all groundfish fishing. This would be any gear type. The results would be, we would see 10.2 square miles open to bottom trawling, which is shown here in purple, 40.1 square miles open to non-trawl and commercial and recreational gears, noting that the allowance for some hook and line gears is already permitted in these 40.1 square miles. Now 2.5 square miles would be actually closed to non-bottom contact gear in the non-trawl RCA, shown here in navy. But overall, we would be looking at much less regulatory complexity and the opening actually only accounts for 0.014% of the EEZ. Just wanted to highlight the NIMS report here. During your justification of the preliminary preferred alternative, it was assumed that large foot rope gear would remain prohibited in this area. However, after some further reflections between council, NIMS, and CDFW staff, we realized that in order to keep that prohibition, the 100 fathom ring actually needs to stay in regulation. So the NIMS report proposes to keep that ring so that large foot rope gear would remain prohibited in the area, and it aligns with the intent of the PPA. So your council action for today is to adopt a final preferred alternative, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, questions for Jesse on her overview? All right, I'm not seeing it, Jesse. Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll turn to Keely Kent in the NIPS report. Oh, Ryan?
Yeah, I think I can give this one since I think Jesse just did it. We've had this in the advanced briefing book. She just showed it on the slide. They're just behind it, but really this is an administrative recommendation for the council to consider just as part of their action, and it's consistent with the PPA. So thanks. Although I'm happy to take questions if there is any.
Too far ahead of me there. Okay, questions on the NIPS report? Seeing none. Thank you, Ryan. With that, we'll go to the GAP report. Dave Kashida. Welcome, Dave.
Hello, Chair Pettinger, staff members, council members and staff. My name is Dave Kashida, and I'm talking on agenda item H5A, supplemental GAP report 1. The Groundfish Advisory subpanel report on Cordell Bank conservation area revisions. This is the final. The Groundfish Advisory subpanel supports the Pacific Fishery Management Council's preliminary preferred alternative as described in our November 24th statement, with the addition of the 100 fathom point-to-point lines to maintain the large foot rope restriction described in the NIMS report under this agenda item as the final preferred alternative. This alternative would provide increased fishing opportunities and afford the regulatory efficiencies by removing the complex and redundant spatial and gear restrictions within the action area. And that concludes the GAP report.
Thank you, Dave. Questions on the GAP report? All right, seeing none. Thanks, Dave. Next up will be the James Phillips, the GMT report. Welcome, James.
Oh, there we go. Good afternoon, Council. My name is James Phillips of the Groundfish Management Team. I'm here to read our report on Cordell Banks. Groundfish Management Team recommends the preliminary preferred alternative as final preferred alternative, with the additions of the administrative modifications to the action alternative recommended by National Marine Fisheries Service to move the existing 100 fathom coordinates outlined in the NIMS report under this agenda item. As described in the GMT's November report on Cordell Bank, the GMT does not anticipate concerning increases in mortality of yellow eye rockfish and California quillback rockfish, nor adverse impacts to the projected rebuilding timelines for these stocks from this action. Adoption of this measure will be deregulatory, reducing stakeholder confusion regarding regulations in the area around Cordell Banks, which will benefit fishing communities. Thank you, and I'll answer any questions.
All right, thank you, James. Questions on the GMT report? Okay, moving right along. Thank you. Next online, we have Dr. Corey Green with the Habitat Committee report. Corey.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be reading agenda item H5A, Supplemental Habitat Report 1, Committee Report on Cordell Bank Conservation Areas. The Habitat Committee received a presentation from Jesse Waller on this agenda item, including a brief discussion on agenda item H5A, NIMS Report 1. The HC supports the recommendation from NIMS to move the existing 100 fathom coordinates around the bank from the Groundfish Conservation Area into the regulations at 50 CFR 660.73 to maintain the 100 fathom ring around Cordell Bank that prohibits large foot rope trawl gear in the area. Of particular interest to the HC, the preliminary draft environmental assessment highlights potential adverse effects to habitat from trawl and non-trawl gear types in section 312. As noted in that section, adverse effects on habitat depend upon the intensity of fishing, the distribution of fishing with different gears across habitats, and the sensitivity and recovery rates of specific habitat features. Sensitive habitats are known to occur within the action area, including hard substrates such as rocky reef habitat of particular concern and deep sea corals and sponges. For various reasons, including limited time and data, a quantitative analysis to augment the existing information was not feasible for this report. However, recent available information, including that contained within the National Fishing Gear Effects on Marine Habitats database, contains relevant information that could be used to supplement the existing analysis. It is worth noting that the information in section 312 summarizes information captured in the Pacific Coast Groundfish FMP and is thus general in nature, whereas our proposed updates are pulled from a limited number of recent references and are, as a result, more specific. The HC suggests the following texts and references be added to the end of section 312 to update information on biogeochemical cycling, derelict fishing gear, plastic pollution, and habitat recovery rates. And 2 paragraphs follow, the first of which focuses on a number of different impacts, including removal of inverts, modification of natural habitats, sediment resuspension, oxidation of stored organic matter, and impacts from derelict gear. And the second paragraph deals with recovery rates from fishing impacts. And I can read that whole if you want, but in the interest of time, I'll keep it brief. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Corey. Questions on the Habitat Committee report? Okay. I'm not seeing any hands. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
All right. And that takes us to the EC report and Jason Krause.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm Jason Krause with the EC, and I'll be reading the Enforcement Consultant's report on agenda item H5, Cordell Bank Conservation Area, revisions final. The enforcement consultants have reviewed the documents associated with agenda item H5, Cordell Bank Conservation Area, revision final, and have the following comments. Regarding H5 Attachment 1, the EC supports Alternative 1, which both promotes compliance and simplifies enforceability of the Cordell Bank Conservation Area by reducing the overlapping polygons in various regulations. The EC also recommends moving the 100 fathom ring coordinates into regulation as recommended by H5A NIPS Report 1. If further alternatives are developed, the EC requests that enforceability be considered. Polygons should be clearly defined, contain the minimum number of waypoints needed, and be large enough to effectively monitor and enforce. It is also important to reduce the complexity of the regulations. Allowing fishing or exemptions within a conservation area not only adds enforcement challenges, but it's also more difficult for fishers to understand and comply with. And that concludes the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Jason. Questions on the EC report? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, takes care of our reports. Takes us to public comment. We have 2. All right, first one will be Ryan Giamona. Ryan, are you there? Okay, let's go down to Richard Powers. Richard, are you there? Go back to Ryan here in a second.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to just speak about the proposal that Fish and Wildlife presented to the council. I just want to commend the department for doing what they've done. I'm a longtime charter boat fisherman. I've probably had 50 years in the business, and a good portion of that was spent early in my life fishing Cordell banks. I personally felt that I probably would never see access to Cordell banks for the public, at least not in my lifetime. And I want to thank, the council for hopefully adopting this proposal. the negative impact that we've had with the loss of salmon the last couple of years has been severe, and we have limited access when it comes to groundfish these days. It would definitely be a breath of fresh air to see something actually open at this stage of the game. I just want to thank you guys for what you're doing, and hopefully it goes through today.
Thank you, Richard. Questions on Richard's testimony? Caroline McKnight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dick, for testifying today. I just wanted to extend our gratitude back. I know that you've been on the phone with us many hours working through these complex regulations and helping us to understand how we can make it better. So we appreciate your time in helping us as well. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
All right, Richard. I don't see other hands. Thank you. All right, going back to Ryan. Not there? Okay. All right, I'll take care of public comment. We'll go to council action. And Mattis.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I know you weren't used to looking to the side of the room for Cordell Bank, but I think this is the culmination of a lot of work by a lot of people to try to ease regulations, provide maybe a little more opportunity, a little less complexity. As the GMT said in their report, it's a deregulatory action, which I know a number of us are looking for with some guidance from the current administration, and should provide some more opportunities for anglers with low risk to habitat or some of our rebuilding species. Acknowledging all of the work that's gone into this, taking this last step, and probably why there's been so few questions to our advisory body reports.
Thank you, Lynn. Caroline?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think if it's helpful, I do have a motion that we could start and maybe get some more discussion going.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, please.
I move the council adopt the preliminary preferred alternative 1 from agenda item H5 attachment 1, March 2025, as the final preferred alternative, and include the coordinates defining the 100 fathom depth contour around the bank in the regulations at 50 CFR 660.73, as recommended in agenda item H5A, NIMS report 1, March 2025.
All right. Is the language accurate on the screen?
It is.
Okay. Second by Mark Grelnick. Thank you. Please speak to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I think I will start by thanking council staff for the presentation and all the different advisory bodies for their contribution and comment on this item. I especially want to thank the Habitat Committee for spending some extra time updating the fishing gear impact information section, and I would definitely support council staff incorporating that information into the final analytical document as appropriate. I just want to acknowledge first that this motion reflects some very robust discussion stemming from our November council discussion, and this has really led to a culmination of some broad support from all of the advisory bodies we heard from today, including public comment. So I just want to reiterate that at the core of alternative 1 here, we have identified a very substantial issue of confusion and complexity where these differing conservation area regulations overlap with these differing boundaries, as you saw in the staff report, that's making it not only difficult to follow the rules, but it's difficult to target groundfish in a reasonable manner out on the water without incurring unneeded regulatory discards. So the launch pad for this really did come about because CDF&W is incurring a significant education and outreach cost to explain these rules to anglers in all sectors, which is difficult and confusing as they currently are. But beyond that, this alternative accomplishes something beyond just needing to make them more comprehensible and reducing the complexity. And first, I just want to acknowledge a major milestone, which is that after many years of constraining measures to rebuild groundfish species, and not quillback withstanding at the moment, there's no longer a need for the Cordell Bank Groundfish Conservation Area tool. And removing this regulation or deregulating is really a testament to the conservation bill being paid. The second is to recognize that there is a unique opportunity here to utilize a groundfish exclusion area, and that will strengthen the habitat protections along the core high relief portion of Cordell Bank, which we know is an area that holds unique and valuable ecological attributes. So I just want to touch quickly that there was mention in the staff report that the amount of real estate that's being reopened here for both rec and commercial, respectively, are fractional in terms of total EEZ access. I think the number was 0.014%. So this is really fractional. But a number of other factors have been identified that will continue to limit the accessibility of this area, which we've mentioned in prior CDF and W reports, and that includes, this is not close to shore. This is hours and hours of run time to get there. So not only is it limiting by how far offshore it is, but we also have recreational season dates that are in place that would limit when you could be out there at all. And then you have the further compounding factor of weather conditions that can be variable and difficult to get out there. And while the commercial sector is limited by weather to some extent in different ways, the staff report showed that we generally have very low effort and performance from our commercial sectors anywhere near this area. The only new information really specific to this motion is for the trawling regulations that came about from the NIMS report. I want to extend my gratitude to NIMS and council staff in working with my staff, Andre Klein, to do a very thorough regulation check. We don't want to have any unintended consequences with this action, and the suggestion to maintain that 100 fathom depth contour in the regs in the appropriate place to maintain only small foot rope gear is 100% in line with our intent, and would probably create more problems if we didn't, and it wouldn't make sense. So again, we want to express our gratitude for making these changes in a synergistic way. So again, I just want to extend my gratitude to all of the input and perspectives that we've received on this action, including our input from our Office of National Marine Sanctuary staff, other NGO representatives, and industry and public comment. And thank you.
All right. Thank you, Caroline. Questions for the motion maker? Good. Corey Ridings.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ms. Knight, for this motion. Just a question if your intention was to include the text and references to be added as recommended in the Habitat Committee report.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Ridings. Yes, at the beginning of my, when I started, I said I would be supportive of that being included. I don't know if that needs to be in the motion per se, but it is the intent to include that as needed. But I'd maybe defer to council staff if they want to clarify.
Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. McKnight, no, I would take that. I think we would plan on incorporating those edits.
Corey, good. All right. All right. More questions? Discussion on the motion? Corey Niles.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to CDFW and staff and everyone who put this together. And yeah, thanks, Corey, for mentioning the Habitat Committee. I feel like this is not our corner of the coast here in Washington, but I feel like the you all in California took a close look and looked at the best available science, and yeah, there could be impacts. I hear you saying that we're opening some fishing grounds, but not a lot of people might use it. So but what you said about the conservation bill, I think, is what our duty under the Magnuson Act is. Of once you rebuild the stocks, you're supposed to share the recovery benefits. And just one comment I couldn't resist. Yeah, there's been papers out coming about the percentage of the EEZ protected, but I think this is a good example of Butch here will remind us that not every inch of the ocean is equal, and there's not halibutans all over the place off of Oahu, for example. And Cordell Bank is maybe 1.147 of the EZ, but it's got a lot more biology going on there. And so in the future, I don't know if that's as meaningful of impact a metric as it could be nuanced, as I'll say. But bigger comment there. Thank you for all the hard work and the close look at the trade-offs here, and supportive, of course.
Thank you, Corey. What else? Okay. Well, seeing none, I'll call for the question. So, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Abstentions? Becca, you have a...
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up question for NIMS. Since this is a good news deregulatory measure, I assume it's going to sail through OMB and be published tomorrow. Thank you.
Ryan Wolf.
To the chair, no comment.
All right. Well, we can't always give people what they want, but it's nice to be able to give them something back and have a little more opportunity. So it's good stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to turn to Executive Director Burton for a kind of announcement here for the rest of the day. So, Rick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have been tracking the development of the salmon items here over the day. There were some hiccups in the modeling yesterday. NIP staff being remote has made it more challenging than usual. So we are still working, and I'm told that the STT should be able to report back to us all at 4 p.m. this afternoon. My understanding is that it would be a stretch to have guidance at that point, and so what I will recommend we do is take the STT report at 4 o'clock, get through that. There might be some public comment associated with it, and then pause for the evening and come back in the morning for guidance. That would be how I would suggest we spell out the rest of the day and into tomorrow morning.
Okay. We'll see everybody at 4 o'clock.
Light savings time change tomorrow. I'm wondering if the executive committee could give some thought to a slightly later start time, if possible, to allow people like maybe a half hour more sleep.
Let's see. Dr. Burton, do you have a thought of that?
I'm happy to think about it. I'm happy to be getting this question from someone other than Corey Niles, too. So.
How about we take that bonus at 4 o'clock and we'll do some discussion with the rest of the leadership up here, and think long and hard on that one. We're done to 4. I'm sorry. To 4. To 4. Son of a bitch.
Okay.
You're a labor guy now, right? Okay, welcome everyone. We're starting off with E4, and with that, I'll hand the gavel off to Vice Chair Hassemer. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back all. We got to our salmon item today, so I'll turn it over to Angela Forstall to give us an overview. We're just starting. Angela.
Thank you all. This is agenda item E4, recommendations for 2025 management measure alternative analysis. Under this agenda item, the STT will be presenting you with the analyzed management measures that the SAS brought forward and the council recommended for analysis yesterday. So the council may need to provide additional clarification to the STT on any questions that arise and may need to provide direction to the STT for changes. I will note that the report did come out within the last hour and we may not get to that guidance here today, but if not, we can take that up as needed at another time. And then once guidance is received, the STT will make those adjustments and bring forward their next set of analysis at the next salmon agenda item. So overall under this agenda item, the council's task is to provide clarification from the STT on any questions as needed and to provide direction on management alternative development and STT analysis and confirm management alternatives for the STT analysis. You do have one tribal report under this agenda item from the Colville tribe, as well as 2 public comments signed up.
All right, thank you. Any questions on the overview? Mark Gorelnik.
Just some clarification. Before we broke earlier this afternoon, I think the discussion was that we were going to take the reports and the public comment today and come back tomorrow for guidance, or is that changed?
It has not changed substantially. I think we're still open, but as Angela said, and as you said, we'll go through the reports, we'll go through the public comment. If there is no guidance to present today, we will hold this open and come back tomorrow for that. Okay, no other questions? Then we will turn to Dr. O'Farrell, who is online, to run through this report that we've received. Dr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, council members. I will be referring to agenda item E4A, supplemental STT report 1, STT collation of preliminary salmon management alternatives. There's 3 tables in this package that contains the regulations or the management measures put forward yesterday. Table 1 has the commercial troll alternatives. Table 2 has the recreational alternatives, and Table 3 has the treaty troll management alternatives. The analysis of these alternatives that were put forward yesterday begins on page 27, Table 5. So turning to that page in this statement, just to orient folks a little bit, if there's a bolded number in here, that means it's currently not meeting its management objective. And so in this case, on Table 5, page 27, you see the Lower Columbia River Natural Tules is bolded for under alternative 1. And I think that is the only bolded value on this page here. We can point out also that at this stage, we don't have all of the inputs that we need to fully evaluate fisheries for the coming year. And there's a variety of things that are done to approximate what those inputs might be, such as using averages or values from last year or preseason forecasts from the previous year. Okay, moving on to page 28, COHO. Interior Fraser Coho, alternative 1 is not meeting its objective at this point. Hood Canal does not meet any of the alternatives here. Grace Harbor also is not meeting the objectives in all 3 alternatives. And Lower Columbia River Natural Coho is 16.5% in alternative 1. And not meeting its objective there at this time. Okay. Let's see here. And that's it for Table 5. That highlights of Table 5. Table 7 has a breakdown of exploitation rates by area for Lower Columbia, or LCN Coho, OCN Coho, and Lower Columbia Tule Chinook. There's nothing bolded in that space yet. Moving on to continuing on with Table 7, we have the breakdown of exploitation rates for Swamp Coho, Trinity Natural Component, Klamath Natural, Rogue Natural, and other Swamp Coho. And at this, right now, things are not, there's nothing bolded in this page. I'd like to make one correction on the footnote at the bottom of page 31. It says totals do not include buoy 10 and estuary freshwater for LCN. I believe that should say totals do not include buoy 10 and estuary freshwater for LCN and OCN. And then at the end of the packet, we have a few appendices that show a breakdown of impacts by area and month. Table A1 shows the impacts for Sacramento River winter Chinook. Table A2 is focused on Klamath River fall Chinook. And table A3 is focused on Sacramento River fall Chinook. That concludes this overview of this package, and I can try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Dr. O'Farrell on what you see in this package? Kyle Laddix.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Dr. O'Farrell. I think I can speak for us all when I say we wish you were here. A couple of questions. First, just to confirm, at least for north of Falcon fisheries, these reflect last year's freshwater and sort of inside marine, outside the ocean fisheries. None of those fisheries have been updated, with maybe the exception of buoy 10 coho.
Yes, I believe that's the case. I guess I would look to John Kerry to see if I'm missing something.
Is John Kerry online? I don't have my screen up in front of me. See, we're trying to get him connected in here.
I am here now. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair, and thanks, Mr. Addix, for the question. I can confirm that, yeah. So everything in there is for Puget Sound and Washington Coastal and Columbia River. As far as I am aware, everything is basically last year's preseason values. For Chinook, for the northern fisheries, we use last year's fishery scalars, the effort scalars, to represent the aggregate abundance-based management fisheries, and the other inside fisheries in Canada are modeled using a recent 2-year postseason average.
Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kerry, Dr. O'Farrell. Mr. Kerry's comments kind of led up to my second question, was if they could remind us of the timing for when we get northern fishery information that has to go into this modeling. We don't get it in time for this meeting, but sometime over the next month we get that and it works its way into the models. But if they could just refresh my memory on that timing.
Yeah, thanks again for the question, Mr. Addix. That's right. So the Pacific Salmon Commission is working on their model calibration for that, and ultimately determines the allowable catches in the aggregate abundance-based management fisheries off the coast in West Coast, Vancouver Island, northern BC, and southeast Alaska. So that model will be hopefully initially run next week and finalized prior to April 1st, and we will have those catch limits to put into the modeling sometime prior to the April meeting.
Thank you. Any further questions, Kyle? Yeah. So what I understood is we're just in a normal place here. Okay. Any other questions for Dr. O'Farrell, Mr. Carey on this SDT report? But then does not appear to be any questions here, but I suppose stand by just in case as we go through this. There are some additional ones. Thank you very much, both of you. We do, have a tribal report. Councilwoman Cindy Marchand from the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. Welcome back to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for having me back. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the council. I appreciate being here and you inviting us up here for a second time. I didn't get the memo on the dress down, but so again, the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation is a confederacy of 12 tribes whose traditional and aboriginal territory covers much of eastern Washington and extends into Canada. The Colville Tribes Reservation is at the terminus of the anadromous salmon migration on the Columbia River in north central Washington. We enjoy federally recognized and protected rights in fisheries managed by the PFMC on our reservation, adjacent to our reservation, and off reservation in our traditional Aboriginal and ceded territories. In 2024, the actual run size for Upper Columbia summer Chinook was 42,511 fish, approximately 20% below the preseason forecast, and the third smallest return since 2000. The situation was worse for the Okanagan River and our Chief Joe Hatchery integrated program due to a 1,000-year flood event in 2020, which scoured salmon redds and choked the acclimation ponds with sediment, forcing an early winter release of parr. This flood event reduced the survival of out-migrating smolts and subsequent return of 4-year-old spawners in 2024. In response to the low escapement situation in 2024, the Colville tribes in the state of Washington implemented emergency fishing regulations to eliminate summer Chinook harvest in the Okanagan River and the portion of Columbia River at its confluence with the Okanagan. And I just kind of wanted to emphasize that, you know, the state of Washington and the Colville tribes working together to make that happen. These local fishing restrictions and sacrifices did help with overall spawning escapement. Unfortunately, the Colville Tribes hatchery brood collection at the mouth of the Okanagan did not meet objectives for natural origin and integrated hatchery origin brood. In order to meet brood collection goals, the program had to collect fewer natural origin fish and collect at alternative locations, thereby decreasing the genetic integrity of the brood stock. Given this year's forecast of only 38,000 Upper Columbia summer Chinook, we anticipate even greater challenges in 2025. Any effort to allow escapement of natural origin Upper Columbia summer Chinook will have tremendous benefits to our efforts to fully and appropriately supply brood to the Chief Joe Hatchery program, which can produce up to 2 million summer Chinook smolts. To help achieve higher escapement of Upper Columbia summer Chinook in 2025, we recommend that non-treaty ocean fishing should reduce impacts during the spring fishing time period. By shifting ocean fishing effort to the summer period, you can achieve the same amount of overall harvest with less impact to Upper Columbia summer Chinook. This shift in ocean harvest will directly result in more natural origin summer Chinook on the spawning grounds and in the hatchery brood. We appreciate your time and consideration of our comments. We look forward to continued participation in the PFMC process in 2025 and appreciate the efforts of your staff, committees, and subpanels to work with the Colville tribes for the benefit of salmon and the people who rely on salmon. Thank you. I also forgot to introduce, I have on my right, Carissa Eichmann, my in-house attorney who deals with our natural resource issues. And I also have our research scientist, Casey Baldwin, AKA the brains behind our operation here, with me also.
All right, thank you and welcome to both of you also here. I want to look around and see if there are any questions for Ms. Marchand on her testimony. Kyle Addix.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. No questions. Just wanted to thank you for being here again this year and especially for your patience over the past couple of days. It was nice to meet with you and your staff yesterday afternoon. Glad we could find that time and thanks for hanging around today. I know you expected to be up here much sooner, but thanks for your patience.
Thank you. We appreciate your time also and for being good partners with us. Thank you.
Right, let me look around once more. And there are no hands, so thank you very much. That completes our reports. Will take us to public comment. There are 2 sign-ups. First is James Dunlap, who is online. Doesn't appear that James is connected, so the second one is Joel Kawahara, and I have seen Joel around here. Come on up, Joel. And we'll come back for a check-in on James Dunlap after Joel is completed. Good afternoon, Joel.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the council. For the record, my name is Joel Kawahara. I'm a salmon troller from Quilcene, Washington. So the issue of the somewhat lower forecast for Upper Columbia River summers came to light at our Washington salmon information meeting. And we were given a scant amount of information at that time regarding where and when those fish were caught. Nothing was current because the Chinook model wasn't running at that time. We were told that moving the fishery a little bit later in the year, out of June and into July would help. And in the past, we have known that the fish were ganging up kind of in the lower half of the state, not always in front of Area 1, per the information that, per the request that the Colvilles just made. I want to state my preference that I would rather see fish moved instead of cut. Cutting a quota is, well, I'm a fisherman. I don't want a quota cut. So if, in response to the Colville letter, we can move fish rather than cutting fish, I want to say as strongly as I can that would be preferred. Secondly, regarding the report we just received, E4A, on page 27, and maybe Michael's seeing this, for the Columbia River summers, I just checked to see what the effect of our alternatives were, and it does not seem to be adding up or subtracting the way we were informed. It should be at our information meeting. Our alternative 1, 2, and 3 are progressively lower harvests or quotas in the ocean, and alternative 1 has the lowest escapement to the mouth of the river of Columbia River summers. Alternative 2 has a slightly higher escapement of summers, and then Alternative 3 has a slightly lower escapement of summers to the river. And from the information we were given, that doesn't make sense. In particular, the lower quotas for Alternative 3 should result in a higher return to the mouth of the river for summers. So I think before we go too much further with this information, that ought to be checked. Somebody, if we can get a table of impacts or something like that, we might be able to both accommodate what the Colvilles are talking about and maybe have a model that actually is going to give us information that we can use. And finally, I do want to speak favorably to the idea of making sure the hatchery gets broodstock. Hatcheries are there to build fish. And again, I'm a fisherman. I want to see fish spawned and, get out to the river and something for me to catch, something for everybody to catch. I'm very much in favor of seeing that happen. Talking fast because I've had a lot of coffee, but I've run out of things to say. I'll take questions.
Thank you, Joel. Danny Evanson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kawahara, for your testimony. I have a couple follow-up questions. I appreciate the sentiment that you are trying to be responsive to the request made by the Colville tribe in E4A. And you talked about wanting to get more fish in for Columbia summers. And you mentioned that you were looking to move fish. Can you clarify or expand on what you meant by that? Was it to shift the timing of the fishery? Or area?
Through the chair or vice chair, Ms. Evanson, the Colville letter talked about shifting the time period for harvest of the ocean quota out of the May-June time period into the July, August, September time period, and that would be a shift of the quota or moving the fish rather than simply chopping on the quota, if that's an explanation.
Danny, go ahead.
Yeah, just one follow-up. So if you were to shift the timing, what other stocks would you encounter, recognizing you're still interested in taking a quota? And if you shape off of one stock, you're necessarily shaping onto others. I don't know if you can answer that.
Through the chair, Ms. Evanson, only partially. We know that the next big wave of fish headed for the Columbia River are the fall stocks. So those would be Tules, Lower River, Mid-Columbia Brights, Pool Brights, Upper River Brights. That includes Snake River Fall, Chinook impacts that have to be balanced. I should have glanced at where we are on that. Snake River Fall impacts are right now 50-60%. We're meant to be no higher than 70% harvest impact on that fish. So moving some, that is displacing the quota into the summer a little bit more, may have some effect on those numbers, but we would not be approaching the ESA impact limit as far as I can see from these tables. But I did point out maybe these tables are need a little scrubbing, or the results need scrubbing. Those are the primary fish that come in later in summer. Towards the tail end of summer, we will be seeing more Oregon coastal fish and potentially the very first of the Washington fall Chinook. The best I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Kyle Laddix, then Butch Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Joel. When you look at the alternatives, you have to remember the north of Falcon alternatives are kind of lined out high quota, medium quota, low quota. South of Falcon fisheries have effects on this stock too, and it might not be quite as linear with those as it is with north of Falcon and the quota level. So the modeling is probably correct. It's just there's more to it with when you bring in all of the other fisheries. And I'm happy to share. We've got all those numbers broken out so we can look at them. They just aren't easy to put into an STT report.
Through the chair, I appreciate that very much, Mr. Addix.
Thank you. Butch Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And thank you, Joe, for your thoughtful testimony. And we are all in this together and need to help one another. And I appreciate the ideas you had, but I haven't got to thoroughly absorb the new model that just came out. And so, but at a quick glance, some of your fishing brothers to the south seem to have some take on those summers too. So maybe in the spirit of working together, that we all have to give maybe a little bit to make sure that the Colvilles get what they can to propagate their hatcheries and have some fish too. So I just wondered, have you talked to some of your fishing brothers south of Falcon to see what maybe they could be working on too to lessen the impact on some of these? Or is the model out too fast? And I understand that too. I haven't had time to digest it.
Through the chair, Mr. Smith, I'm not going to simply cop out and say the model came out too fast. We have been looking at, if I may, ODF&W has actually a pretty marvelous addition to their website. Kudos to ODF&W, where you can look at, instead of doing an ARMIS search, you can look at the tags that show up in a fishery by time period, by port landed and whatnot. You're not WDF&W, but I'll just put it out there. If WDF&W had such a tool, it would be just freaking marvelous. When we looked at that, we did see things like wells and smilkamine and whatnot also in the fish that were landed in 2024 in Newport. So I'm not unaware of that. None of that was given harvest rates or any percentages of catch. They were noticeable. You could see them. And that's as far as I got with that. And that was pointed out by somebody from Newport.
Thank you, Joel. It just might be the case in one of these years that everybody brings something to the soup pot to make the soup as good as we can. So there's a lot of shaping to do before we're done, and a lot of things to look at, I believe. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Any further questions for Mr. Kawahara? Not seeing any. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you very much for your time.
I'm going to do one more check and see if James Dunlap has joined us. Does not look like he has. So that completes our public comment and takes us to discussion. There may have been some further questions that have come up. And again, if there is no guidance to provide at this point in time, then we will keep this agenda item open into tomorrow. So let me look around and see if there's hands. Marcy Remco.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Is Dr. O'Farrell available?
I hope he is. Dr. O'Farrell, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Great. Thank you. If I may, I'm hoping maybe you can review with us the impacts of the alternatives to Klamath Fall, which I expected to be constraining in this package. And I'm looking on page 27, and I'm looking at alts 1, 2, and 3, and all are within the constraints imposed by the FMP, under a 10% exploitation rate. Maybe you can explain why that is? Thank you.
To the chair, yes, I mean, it's very early and we're still trying to, learn as much as we can about what these patterns mean. I did some looking at this today too, because other people have mentioned this, and I will say that there is quite a bit of shaping in the alternatives to stay away from some high impact areas in the peak months in the summer. There's some early season fisheries, and there's seemed like to me, and I wasn't there, of course, with the SAS, but so that looked like there was some thought about trying to stretch out some kind of fishing, by not going to the areas that are most expensive in terms of impacts. That's my current understanding of it right now. I mean, we've only done this one model run, and we're going to learn more as we move forward here, and we're going to continue to look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have another question, but not for Michael.
Go ahead with it.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to mention that I had an opportunity to meet with the California SAS this afternoon about some of the inputs that were included based on our motion yesterday regarding Sacramento Fall Chinook, specifically the motion that specified to set the Sacramento River recreational impacts at 15% of the total harvestable surplus. And in my discussion with the SAS this afternoon, they have all conveyed to me that they are interested in seeing something different in one of these alternatives, so that a river recreational share is assigned based on the default out of the model instead of fixing the input at 15%. And I was hoping I might be able to call George Bradshaw up. We had this 2-hour discussion, but I would like to, if I may, give him the opportunity to explain a little further. Thank you.
Sure. George?
Good afternoon, Council Chair, Mr. Uremko. I think that there's a lot of questions early in this salmon, strategy process of coming up with these season dates, access along our coast. I think it's no secret to anybody that, our stocks are not doing well, especially in California. They're rather limiting, to say the least. There's a new framework that has been, brought onto the fisheries in California that we're still trying to wrestle to the ground and figure out. And there was guidance on the floor, recommending a deviation from the change of, status quo for that Sacramento fall run stock in the harvest model. Since it is still early and since we are still trying to figure out a lot of different problems as well, we recommended that we would have one alternative be status quo, and for that harvest model output, it falls in line with the guidance of this council for public transparency, the ability to have public review, We're still in the early process where we have 3 alternatives that we're going to run through the public process and come back in April. We don't want to jump ahead of ourselves. Maybe this other way is better at the end. But our recommendation was to have one of the 3 alternatives with that status quo so that it left it open for, public input through this process.
Mark Gorelnik.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thanks, George. Status quo is sort of ambiguous to people around the table here. Can you explain what that means in terms of numbers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't think the request is really about the numbers in our view. The request is that it's the way that this process has been ran for a long time. We've had one other time, to my knowledge, where we've deviated from that. And it was probably the best decision made at the time. It's probably why we went through with it. But, my understanding was that it was later in the process and we're past that 3 alternative step for public review. And like I said, I am frustrated at times with, the process that seems slow here. But it is what this process is for, and it's meant to be able to have public input and public review through this process. And, that's the sole reason why we're asking. But that default, Mark, what you're speaking to is, a set historical average of around, 14.5% of escapement. And then that kicks into amount of fish for inland harvest, so that it leaves fish available for inland harvest.
All right, so just that means increasing the river share of the harvest to 14.5% or whatever percent of the escapement.
Yeah, that's the way.
I understand that.
Yeah, that's the way. Yes, that's the way that harvest model historically runs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Marcy.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just to clarify, the 14.5% is from the in-river run size. It's not the escapement. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear on what and this is, again, the default in the model. As you heard in the CDFW report earlier in the week, and as came out in the motion yesterday, that the direction was to fix, instead of using that default, fix the percentages at 15% assigned to the in-river harvest of the total harvestable surplus. So if I may, I have a question for George. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Do you have a recommendation, George, on which of the 3 alternatives you would like to revert back to the default?
Through the chair, thanks, Mr. Remco. I think from our conversations earlier, it'd make the most sense to have that in alternative 2.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? All right. Let me just verify then there is no guidance to provide at this time in any of these. Not seeing any discussion here. Are we done today? And we will just pause our work on this agenda item and come back tomorrow when we're ready to deliver guidance. Angela?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I do appreciate everyone taking in the report today and spending some time with it to develop guidance and returning tomorrow, and everyone's had a bit more time to digest. Sounds like a good plan to me.
All right, thank you. Then at this point, I will pause on this agenda item and turn the gavel back to our chair.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Hassemer. And before we leave here, I'll turn to Executive Director Burton for a plan for tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members. So the plan we have in mind is to return first thing tomorrow morning and take this up for guidance at that time. Is it reasonable to assume that that's possible to do this evening? Just want to look at the folks that are leading that process. Will you be ready with guidance tomorrow morning? Yeah, okay. Then after chatting with our chairman here, we are, I think, reluctant to delay time more. We're a little bit behind on salmon anyway, and with our federal partners working remotely, it's hard to play catch up. So we would like to start at 8 a.m. tomorrow, even though we're losing an hour tonight. So my apologies. Otherwise, what we're looking at for tomorrow is maintaining the balance of the agenda as scheduled. We may at some point simply drop one of our salmon check-ins, but at this point we're going to hold on to everything that we have on the agenda until we learn a little bit more about how things unfold. So happy to answer any other questions, Mr. Chairman. Otherwise, I think what we're aiming for is 8 a.m. tomorrow with this agenda item.
All right, thank you. I'll look for any questions to be asked, but I'm not seeing any hands. So with that, have a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Thank you.